only February. And I know that you haven't even started Lent yet. But in the Worship Design Studio, we talk about planning together and planning ahead. And it is actually time to start thinking about what you want to do for the Easter season. And really, it makes sense when you think about as you're planning for Lent, as you're getting ready for Lent and Holy Week. And we had the Holy Week webinar last week. And if you didn't join us, you can find the recording of that on my YouTube channel. As we're planning for that, we want to really think about the follow-up, which is the Easter season. I mean, what do you do when you get to Easter? Well, actually, we have a whole season of things, a season of time that we can focus on the resurrection story. In fact, what we're going to find out is that for the early church, the Easter season, from Easter to Pentecost, was more important to them, they spent more time and energy and focus on that than they did the Lent season. So, it kind of makes sense. I want to plant a little seed here. It kind of makes sense to think, well, in many of our churches, Easter Sunday has like the biggest crowd. Now, why not have something amazing that you can say to them that day? Stick with us for the next 7 weeks. We've got this great series coming up, and really do a big invite, something that will really intrigue them. Oftentimes we say that the Sunday after Easter is a low Sunday, and actually we should just be revving up. So I want to plant that seed for you today, and plant the idea that really thinking at this point, how are you going to follow up on this journey that you've taken all through Lent and Holy Week? How are you going to follow that up? What Easter message of hope and resurrection is it that your community needs to hear? We are going to start with just a couple of announcements. This won't take long, but I do want you to know that there are a couple of opportunities coming up for you to come and study with me live. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm doing the pilot project, the debut of my new Worship Design Studio experience teaching format, and that will start with a Saturday workshop all day. We'll talk about, this is really geared to getting your team, to really building a team, helping you work together on worship. And so we're going to do an all-day workshop where the whole team is there, and then once a week on Tuesday nights, I'm going to have a different worship arts. And so you send the people who are interested in working on that worship arts, so visual arts, music arts, media arts, verbal arts, and dramatic arts. And so I'm very excited about it. We already have several churches signed up for that, and I'm very excited. I'll be doing this in different parts of the country coming up in the next year or so, but we're going to pilot it and try it out here during Lent. You can always go to marciamcfee.com and click on calendar and find out more about each one of these things. Also, I still have a few spots left for my Elevation Retreat. Every year I do a retreat that is a skills building and continuing education and spiritual renewal retreat at Lake Tahoe. I have been privileged to call Lake Tahoe home for the last 7 years, and we have this retreat at Zephyr Point Conference Center, and this is an actual picture of the bench that is right outside of our meeting room. So we are right on the lake. When I tell you you're coming to Lake Tahoe, you're coming to Lake Tahoe. It's absolutely gorgeous. We've had, over the last 7 years, hundreds of people come to this, and this is my smallest retreat. I try to keep it intimate so that I can spend really good time with you, but we do have some spots still left. So again, go to marciamcfee.com, click on calendar, and you'll find more information and registration there. It's one price for the whole week, Monday through Friday, and it includes registration, housing, and meals, just one price fits all. All right, so another opportunity to study with me is the Worship Design Studio Planning Retreat. So take these little webinars that I'm doing about each part of the liturgical year and then explode that into 3 days of going through the entire liturgical year. By the time you get done with the retreat, you have gotten themes and broad brushstrokes to plan out your whole next year. This will be in September and October, Lake Junaluska, North Carolina, Wesley Center, Louisiana in September, and then Zephyr Point back at Lake Tahoe in October, late October. So those are also great, fun things to come to. All right, and finally, as a thank you gift for being on this webinar, I give you a $50 coupon code to go towards a year subscription to my online Worship Design Studio. And if you want more information, you want to see behind the scenes more, what is in the Worship Design Studio, you can join me live any Thursday, most Thursdays unless I'm traveling. And I'm changing the time this week, and I'm just going to try 1 p.m. It used to be at 3 p.m., but 1 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Eastern. So you can always come on and just chat with me or find out more about the studio. Okay, Easter season, my friends. This picture is a picture of a liturgical setting, a worship center setting by Worship Design Studio guest expert Todd Pick. Todd and I collaborated on many occasions, but this picture is from General Conference of the United Methodist Church in 2012. And I just love how Todd uses different textures and colors. And this, of course, you see in the background, we had the screens in the background, so the screens really became part of that visual. So you've got the fire there on the beach. It was actually one of Jesus' post-resurrection appearances on the beach with the disciples. And I love the way that he brings these reds in, but all the different textures as well. We're going to be talking about the Easter season, which of course includes Easter Sunday through Pentecost. All right, why consider the liturgical year? Those of you who were on with me last week, we went through some of this. This is going to be a little bit more brief. Those of you who missed the Holy Week webinar, you can find that on my YouTube channel. But let's just get a little context here about the Easter season and the development of that. So from the beginning, humans have been finding ways to ritualize human longing through ritual. And I love this little ancient depiction of this community, and they've come through a gate, through a threshold. And in the worship design studio, we talk about every worship service, I believe, needs a threshold moment. And certainly as we design in series or seasons, which I think is a really great idea, because it helps us get some continuity and some repetition as well as new things. But a threshold moment could be a song, it could be an alleluia for the Easter season that repeats itself at the beginning of every worship service. But there are these ancient figurines, people who bind together. That's the root of the word religion, to bind together through common practices. So early rituals for the early peoples were around seasons and food and survival and coming of age and procreating and death and all those human things, trying to give sort of extraordinary meaning to very ordinary things of life. And then later, the Hebrew people ritualized meaning, happenings, building an altar whenever they encountered God, community, promise, covenant, all of these things that Yahweh God, this relationship, this right relationship with the one God. Then later, Christian ritualizing began to ritualize around an actual history, an actual historical person, a story, a narrative, an identity, and rhythms of memory and time. And our rituals began to take on these actual practices of Jesus during Jesus' time. So the development of the liturgical year is the story of a living tradition that can deepen our present ritual practices, I believe. I just know that whenever a church that I'm consulting with goes deeper into, helps the whole congregation enter more deeply into the meaning, the history, the theology of a season, they enrich their spiritual journey. People take more ownership. They feel like they are part of a living tradition. And so I think it's a really good thing, even if you assume that everybody in your church knows about the season, to do some educational attempts as you prepare for the season. It might be in a newsletter, it might be during your sermons, it might be the first Sunday of the series, or as you're coming up on a series. There's many different ways to educate your congregation, but I always believe that education deepens our spiritual journey the more we know about what it is that we're doing. So the cycle of the first century church was the week. That was the first liturgical cycle, just the week. And Sunday comes around every week. You know that if you're designing worship, right? Relentlessly. So Sunday was considered by the early church the eighth day, right? The 7 days of creation, and then the eighth day, which is sort of the alpha and omega, the foretaste of the reign to come. And then the second century church began to celebrate Pascha, or Easter, although every Sunday is still considered a little Easter. And that's why in Lent, we don't count the Sundays of Lent as part of that 40 days, because it's still, even in Lent, considered a little Easter. In the second century church, what we know is that Easter was a fixed date, the 14th of Nisan. And it was a unitive celebration of the whole of Jesus' death and resurrection, and the time par excellence for baptisms. We talked about this in the Holy Week webinar and the Lent webinar, how prominent baptism is in the development of all of these liturgical seasons as the church was growing. So by the 3rd century, the church has 3 big days. Now, I made people guess last week in the webinar. So Epiphany, Pascha, and Pentecost. Now, in 325, the First Council of Nicaea, the date of Easter was changed from a fixed date to a moving date. And believe me, much blood and pen was shed on this whole debate about whether Easter should be on a fixed date or a moving date. Well, the folks that won out were the ones that wanted the moving date. And so the Sunday after the first full moon, after March 21st, which at this time they believed was the vernal equinox. Now, it's always around that time. It's not always that date. But we take that date because that's what the early church believed was the vernal equinox. So they're taking the vernal equinox, the beginning of spring, and they're saying the Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, is Easter. So this liturgical year, April 15th is the first full moon after March 21st, so almost a full month before we get a full moon. So that's why Easter is so late this year, April 20th. Now last year, March 25th was the first full moon. So it was very close to March 21st. That's why we had an early Easter last year. But that's why we get this movable feast, which then creates a different length of time for our whole Epiphany through Lent season, which is different every year. All right, now, by the 4th century, when Christianity is all the rage, comes out of the closet, gets legal, we see that 3 big days have developed into many more commemorations. And in the Holy Week podcast webinar last week, we went through all of those. But as it relates to the Easter season, the Great 50 Days, the Easter season, was developed at this time. It's a season of joy, of celebration, and of catechism. So they're instructing folks who have just been baptized. They're continuing the instruction of those who are baptized on Easter, but they are preparing the folks who are going to be baptized on Pentecost, because Pentecost was another huge day for baptisms in the early church. Now, originally Ascension and Pentecost were together, and then they got split out. So really by the 4th century, by the end of the 4th century, we have our liturgical calendar pretty much as it is, except for Ash Wednesday, Trinity Sunday. Some other ones come later. All right, so the early development of the Easter season itself had some roots and some affinity to pre-Christian rituals, the Jewish season of 50 days, called the Festival of Weeks. And it's really around the first harvest, celebrating the first harvest, giving thanks to God for the first harvest, starting at the beginning of the harvest season, around Passover, and then giving thanks for first fruits, and ending on the 50th day, which is Pentecost. That's what Greek Pentecost means, the 50th day. Now, as I said, the early development of the Christian Easter season has roots in instructional period for catechumens that are baptized on Pentecost. So like Lent, these folks would be baptized on Pentecost, and so their intense instruction would happen before Pentecost during the Great 50 Days, or as a time of continued instruction for those baptized at the Easter Vigil. So they're still going to Sunday school. And the season of joy and peace was originally much more important than the season of Lent. It kind of makes sense, wouldn't you think? That a season of joy and peace would be, we'd want to put a lot of effort into that. But it feels like over time, Lent sort of took on a greater importance. And certainly through the Middle Ages, when we get a more penitential feel to Lent, that becomes a really big season. And the Easter season takes a little more of a back seat through that time. And again, I want to just, if you just joined, I want to plant this seed that what would happen if you put as much thought into what you would do for the series for Easter season as you do for Lent, perhaps, and have something really provocative, evocative, interesting, spiritually deep, ready for people when they came to their Easter Sunday service, and you invited them. Just spend the next 7 weeks. If you're not a regular churchgoer, just give it a try. The next 7 weeks, what would it be like to have a spiritual home with us? So Ascension is established as a separate celebration in the late 4th century, separate from Pentecost. Still, humans continue to find ways to ritualize our human longing. And I always look at the liturgical year and the theological themes as very human themes. And so I believe that any liturgical season is an intersection of who we are, what matters to us, that's what makes worship relevant, what we yearn for, what is our deep spiritual human yearnings, and then whose we are. What do all these things matter in light of whose we are? What does the good news, what is the gospel good news for us in our context? Because really the first 3 questions are context, and whose we are is the gospel response to our context. So in the Easter season, we have Easter. Yearning for purpose, for renewal, for new life in the midst of death, for starting again. These are seminal themes in Easter Day. And I think a good question for us on Easter Day is, how can we live as Easter people without fear? The idea is that death has no hold, that through our baptism we've already died and risen with Christ. How would our lives be different if we really lived as if we are already risen with Christ? That there is nothing to fear. So then the Easter season, a whole 50 days, 7 weeks of 50 days of yearning for joy, the joie de vivre, the joy of life, for celebration. It just sounds better in French, doesn't it? The joie de vivre, for celebration in our lives. And a good question for our congregations could be, what holds us back from daring to dance our dance fully? I have a theme in an Easter season theme in the Worship Design Studio called Dare to Dance. And it's based on a song by a friend of mine called Dare to Dance Again. And I think it's a really good question. What holds us back from unbridled joy, from unbridled passion, from daring to dance our dance fully? Being fully who we are and offering that to the world. The Easter season is the time to really ask that question. And then, of course, Pentecost comes as the culmination of the Easter season. Many people think that Pentecost and the Sundays after are the season of Pentecost, and that's a huge, long season. Actually, Pentecost is just a day, and then there are the Sundays after Pentecost, that is ordinary time. So Pentecost is the culmination of the Easter season. We see that as part of that whole season. Yearning for a sense of empowerment, being filled and fulfilled, a common purpose. And a good question for our congregations on Pentecost is, how can this church reaffirm and strengthen its purpose? Now, this is a question that came to me one Pentecost, and the word Roland is on there because it's reminding me to tell you this story. One Pentecost, I was heading to church, and I was feeling burnt out. And I thought, that's kind of funny on Pentecost to feel burnt out, right? I thought, oh Lord, it's Pentecost. I'm already burnt to a crisp. What are you going to do with me now? Any more fire, and I'm just going to be ashes on the floor. I was burnt out. You ever get burnt out? I have a feeling that you do. Any of us in ministry, any of us in our lives get burnt out at one time or another. And I just thought, I said, oh Lord, sort of, I don't know if I was really praying or if it just came out, oh Lord, but God heard as a prayer. And I turned on my radio, and it happened to be on the classic rock station. And I just, out of the blue, it was this song. I hadn't heard it for a ton of time, but this song, let's see how long it takes. As soon as you realize what the title is, put it in the chat box. Ready? Okay, here we go. Anybody know it? As soon as you are able, come and I am willing. As soon as you are able, and I am willing. We are on the brink of, my cup is on the is on the table. Our love is spilling. Waiting here for you to come and take a drink of it. So if you're tired of the same old story, turn some pages. I'll be here when you are ready. Roll with the changes. And I said, and you're So anybody recognize that? I don't know if you could hear it very well, but it's rolling with the changes. REO Speedwagon spoke to me. Jesus spoke to me through REO Speedwagon that day. And I never realized that, it has this communion imagery. The cup is on the table. Our love is it's spilling over. It's abundant. It's poured out on us. And if you're tired of the same old story, turn some pages. Now that will preach. It did to me that day. So Pentecost for me is a time to reassess our purpose, to say, what are we here about? What's going on for us? Yeah, I am a rock and roller. And I think that, those words really have stuck with me around Pentecost. It's waiting there for us to take a drink of it. We just have to invite people to the feast, to the Spirit that is poured out. All right. So Pentecost, Easter season, Ascension, Pentecost. That's what we're about today. So let's take a look at some Easter season theological starting points. We already talked about the fact that catechesis, or learning, teaching of the newly baptized, is a historical point. So actually digging into the foundations of our faith and really learning more about our faith could be very appropriate, especially historically appropriate for us in the Easter season. Preparing for baptism, confirmation, new members. This, of course, is often a time when we are doing confirmation for our young folks or for anybody who is getting ready to join the church. So you could really have a focus in the Easter season, not just for confirmands, but also people who want to sort of recommit their faith and go through a series of perhaps weekly get-togethers to sort of dig in and renew what it is that their membership in the church means to them. It could be a very exciting time. Presence of Christ in the community. Some more theological starting points. Rejoice, Thanksgiving, a whole season worth of just giving thanks. Gratitude is a theme. Living as if death does not hold us. No fear. That could be a theme. No fear. Season of joy. Amazing. Believe it. Resurrection continues. And I'm going to show you a theme that I did last year where we really focused on, this was the theological starting point that I wanted to use, that resurrection continues to happen in our lives. We see people being resurrected from so many things. And I'll show you that in a minute. Jesus' appearances present in our midst. The post-resurrection appearances. Wonderful stories. The seminal messages are there in Jesus' appearances. God's creation, God's new creation. Now, what's really interesting to me is that this year, Earth Day is Easter Sunday. I mean, if you're going to do something about Earth Day, which is just a couple days after Easter, then you would do that on Easter Sunday, or maybe the Sunday after Easter. But you could do an entire series focused on the love of creation and incorporate the Earth Day activities that are happening in your community. So that's a really interesting one. And I'll show you a theme that I've been dreaming about related to that. Our lives in Christ is the body of Christ, the breath of Christ, the hands and the feet of Christ. Being Christ in the world is another direction. Our lives filled with the Spirit. Don't just wait for Pentecost to talk about the Spirit. There are so many Spirit songs. You could fill the entire Easter season with Spirit focus on that third person of the Trinity and really focus just on Spirit and let Pentecost be the culmination of that rather than just bringing that up on Pentecost. Expansive freedom, beyond eternity, endless, the endless possibilities. Of course, the picture I have up, the horizon, the sunrise, that is always sort of the quintessential image of a new dawn and endless horizons. So, there's a title for you, Endless Horizons, or What's on the Horizon, or Just Beyond the Horizon. That could be a theme. It's a great spiritual harvest season, which picks up, as you notice, on the Jewish Feast of Weeks, which is focused on harvest. Now, what's really interesting is, and I'll show you a picture later on, is that the Eastern Orthodox Church, really, their Pentecost really focuses on this harvest idea that's very much tied to the Jewish Feast of Weeks. Party, festive, celebration, the Alleluias. These are all themes that could be very strong in the Easter season. I want to just pause for a moment. What is the Easter message that we need to hear, do you think, this Easter? Based maybe on your context or what's happening in the world, what do you think what's the good news that we need to hear? I want to just pause for a moment and have you write in your chat box a phrase, a word. What is the Easter message that we need to hear? There are no wrong answers, by the way. Grace and joy, hope. Yeah, hope. God has not forgotten you. Nice. We are an Easter people. Living fearlessly. Christ is the same today. There is life in Christ like living. Nice. These are great, yeah. Resurrecting a bold faith, an audacious faith. I've always wanted to use that word audacious in a theme. Christ is first, we are second. Developing overcoming faith. Nice. That sense of overcoming adversity. Wonderful. Yeah. I think the Easter season brings us so many theological themes that are timely for us in our context. So yeah, let's take a look at some ideas. So I'm going to go into the worship design studio, and just let me know, folks, real quick in the chat box if you can see the worship design studio here that I've just brought up, just to make sure. I brought up the web page. Okay, terrific. So in the worship series here, I'm clicking on worship series, and you'll see that I am doing the heart of the matter this year for the Easter series. Now I'm going to just click on Easter season and filter this. You see I have 41 series, so the way that you get to the ones to just the Easter season is to filter it. And you'll see I have 6 different things that I have worked on in the last 6 years around the Easter season. The heart of the matter, which I'm going to show you a little bit more in just a moment. But Resurrection Stories is what I did last year. It's a non-lectionary series, so it could be used in any lectionary year. Frankly, if your congregation is not hard and fast following the lectionary all the time, you could use any of these, even though I developed them for different lectionary years. 3 years ago, when we were in year A, like we are now, I did one called Rise Up. And then A Place to Call Home was a lectionary-based Year B season series. There's the Dare to Dance Again. That was Year B as well. And then The Cup of Freedom was a lectionary-based Year C Easter season series. But again, most of these, I would say all of these, you could adapt to this year, even if you follow the lectionary. But let's take a look real quick at the one non-lectionary one that I have here, Resurrection Stories, that we did last year that you might be interested in. I'm clicking on this little icon called Brainstorms, and it brings up what we call the brainstorm page. You can create sticky notes that and your team can collaborate online whenever they want to and add their ideas. But when you use one of my templates in the Worship Design Studio, you get resources that I've put together in a document like this. Now, Resurrection Stories is really based on the idea, as I said, that resurrection happens in our lives. The Easter season is a time of celebrating all the ways in which resurrection is possible in our lives. We can be in need of rising out of the depths of imprisonment, addiction, illness, oppression, not just physically and literally, but also spiritually. What holds us back from the joy of life? What binds us, keeping us from the fullness of who God created us to be? What keeps us down? Join us for powerful testimonies, resurrection stories from those who have found resurrection in their lives. It might just inspire you to your own rising up. Now, that's what I call a synopsis of a series. And for those of you who are not members of the Worship Design Studio, one of the things that I teach in the Worship Design Studio is that creating a 3 to 4 sentence synopsis about a series can really be a wonderful piece to have, not only for telling people what's coming up in the Easter season. So you could actually make a little flyer with this that you give out on Easter Day to invite people to come back. But also, as you're planning your worship, if you're working with visual artists and musicians and folks who put together drama or dance or media, this begins to give them, if you can get this ready, 8 weeks before, we're about 8 weeks before the Easter season here, if you can decide what theme you're going to do and give folks a description like this, then you are giving them a really focused way to then help you come up with resources and ideas, music, visual ideas, all of those kinds of things. So that's what I call a synopsis. Now, this series is based on the idea that there would be perhaps a testimony every week from someone who has found resurrection in their lives. Now, I give you some examples here, and then you have to sort of create your own Sundays based on the people that you have access to who have these stories. But for instance, if there is someone who speaks to people about having come out of jail, having turned around their lives, who were imprisoned, that's an example of a week. Resurrected from addiction. If you have somebody who is willing to talk about their story of getting clean, of getting sober, that can be such a powerful, powerful testimony. Resurrected from homelessness, people who have, are willing to share their story of being on the brink of financial disaster or having come back from financial disaster. It used to be that was not very many people. These days, there's probably more people than we really know in our congregations who really are needing to feel resurrected from fear of that and from actual scarcity. Resurrected from illness, not to say that it's just all about healing, but the way that I put this is illness of mind, body, or spirit can sap us of our life, passion, and energy. Sometimes illness can change the course of our lives forever, asking us to adapt in ways we never imagined. A resurrection story of rediscovering a passion for life after a paralyzing accident will offer us a different perspective on how we deal with any life-altering situation. So it could be somebody who is dealing actively with illness. It's not that they were resurrected and somehow became healed. And in fact, sometimes having somebody offer that testimony, it can be powerful, but it can also be disheartening for people who are not having those results. So really focusing more on how do we resurrect from the life situations we've been given. Resurrected from oppression. It could be that you have refugees from various countries or immigrants it just depends on what the stories are, the people in your area, or the stories that you can collect. You could also find these stories on the internet, often in videos and things, and use other people's story outside of the community if getting folks within the community is a problem. And then resurrected from the depths. Mental illness is still one of the most taboo subjects, the most stigmatized illness. And so one of the ideas here is if you have somebody who came back from a war situation and has PTSD or any sort of mental illness that people are willing to talk about and shed a positive light on how we must deal with this in our midst. So that's the idea for a whole series, an Easter season series about continued resurrection. So resurrection stories. And the resources that I have in here are all about storytelling, and in the worship design studio, I give you ideas for every worship art. So like an anchor image here could be doors, locks that are unlocked. That's a great anchor image. I call an anchor image something that really helps us get a tangible symbol about the theme that we're doing that can show up in different ways. So we have some liturgy and poetry, some calls to worship, some visual arts ideas, weaving our stories together. So story weaving, that can be a good visual. So this is the kind of thing that we have in the worship design studio. So I wanted to share that series with you because it is one that a lot of people did last year, and they reported that it was really powerful. And just as powerful as experiencing the stories was the power of asking people to share their story and having that answered, and how empowering that felt for them. Now, last time, it was year A, I did a series called Rise Up. Now, as I read the lectionary, there are some big deals of the faith that come up. And so based on the idea of the early church and their catechism that continued throughout the Easter season, I thought, well, let's look at these big deals. And so belief, salvation, suffering, sacrifice, judgment, kingdom of heaven, prophecy, these are all things that come out in the lectionary. Now, that's just one theme. Those of you who have been in the worship design studio know that I say that series worship, or creating a series, is not antithetical to lectionary preaching, because you can find threads throughout the lectionary. And so I wanted to do another lectionary one this year that was different from this one. And so that's why I've decided on the Heart of the Matter, which is a lectionary series, which we're going to take a closer look at in just a moment. A Place to Call Home was really based on what I've already said to you, and my idea that Easter is a great time to invite people to come back during the Easter season. Just give it a try. Give church going a try. Those Easter, Christmas people who just come on those days. And so I created a whole series called A Place to Call Home, and it's really based on what would it mean to have a spiritual home. And it's 7 weeks of taking people through what does it mean to be in community. So friends, that's kind of a brief look at what I've got in the worship design studio. But let's take a look at the Heart of the Matter, and the one that I decided not to do, because you may decide to do it. The one I decided not to do, I really waffled on this, would have been a non-lectionary series called Morning Has Broken. And the subtitle is It Just Dawned on Me. Anyway, using that sort of dawned on metaphor for new beginnings. Morning has broken, and using that song, Morning Has Broken, as sort of a theme song, but also a thread throughout. And I based my titles on that song. So like the first morning is Easter. And Praise for the Singing is the second Sunday. Sweet the Rain's New Fall is the third. Mine is the Sunlight is the fourth. Born of the One Light is the fifth. God's Recreation is Ascension. And then Of the New Day is Pentecost. And my idea is that every sermon would start in this series, it just dawned on me. And then you would take off. So if anybody does that, I want you to write me and tell me how it went. Maybe this is what I'll do next year for Easter season. But I came very close to doing it. But I really wanted to do another lectionary series, so I decided not to pursue this one. But really, do let me know if you do it. I'd love to hear. So what I did decide was the Heart of the Matter, or you could call it Love is My Religion. The Ziggy Marley tune that was playing as people came on is called Love is My Religion. And really, this series was inspired by this year I've had the great pleasure of working with 3 congregations that inspired me in this direction, I realized. And I didn't realize that until after I had sort of decided to go in this direction. I got to preach at Glide Memorial United Methodist Church early in January. And Glide is in San Francisco. And Cecil Williams, who's the preacher there, he was the founder of Glide as it is now. He's emeritus now. He's still there. But Karen Olivito, my friend, is the pastor there. And she invited me to preach. And, they are using this, their motto is unconditional love. And I'm so taken with the way that they live that out. If you don't know about Glide, I encourage you to go on their website. One of the most extensive programs of feeding people. They are right in the Tenderloin section, the most homeless in the city there, and through their programs of recovery from addiction and homelessness. And it's just amazing, the unconditional love there. So I was really struck by them. Second congregation I got to be with was my old congregation in Dallas, where I used to live, North Haven United Methodist Church, and they were doing a series that had a heart as their anchor image, and they were asking the question, "What breaks your heart?" Which I think is a really good question. And then thirdly, there's a congregation, brand new congregation, and they've been doing a series on love. There's Silicon Valley Progressive Faith Community, and they on their cups have "Love is my religion." And so I realize that these influences in the whole of the year have sort of influenced me in this direction. But that's the way it happens sometimes as creative individuals. The things that we come in contact with are what inspire us. And so I invite you to keep a notebook all through the year of ideas that might pop up in other seasons. The world is our parish, as Wesley used to say, and life is the palette. All right, so the heart of the matter. So the life and death of Jesus had one strong message that was both overt and inherent: love one another. The heart of the matter was love. Ziggy Marley sings, "Love is my religion. With you I share the gift we now know." Time and again we hear Jesus offer the disciples a post-resurrection message of empowerment to give to the world what he had given to them. This Easter season we will encourage one another and truly live out the heart of the matter. So "Love is my religion" is the Easter message, is the Easter title. And then with glad hearts, here's what happened. In the lectionary, almost every Sunday except for Easter, the word heart is in the lectionary. Hello. So pretty easy to pick those out and then see how the other scriptures fit around that. But with glad hearts, we have, "Therefore my heart was glad" from Acts. And then straight from the heart, the First Peter is saying, "Love one another deeply from the heart." Hearts overflowing is the next one. And this one, day by day that they lived with glad and generous hearts. "No trouble in my heart" is the next one. And this is, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." And "Open the eyes of my heart" is Ascension. And it says, "With the eyes of your heart enlightened, you may know what is the hope to which he has called you." And then the heart of the matter, using the actual name of the series on Pentecost. And of course, the Spirit poured out that day. And from John, the gospel says, "Out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water." So I'm really excited about putting this together. And what I'll be doing over the next 4 weeks is gathering resources. My colleague Sharon Fenema is always the one who is helping put those together. And we will have those for you about a month before the season starts. So if you are a member of the Worship Design Studio or become one, you will have access to that season. And the idea is that you start collecting your own ideas, and then when I give you my ideas about a month before the season starts, you add those in, and you just have a whole lot to start with. Okay, let's get to some specific ideas for the Easter season practices. And we'll finish out with this. So get out the Alleluias. Many people will do a practice that has become quite popular, and that is, in Lent, put the Alleluias away. So you can literally do this in a children's sermon and have Alleluia written in many languages on big pieces of paper, roll them up, put them in a box, put the Alleluias away during Lent. And then at Easter, let out the Alleluias. And one of my favorite practices is to do global Alleluias from all over the world during the Easter season. It's a great time to teach your congregation some global songs, because Alleluia pretty much sounds the same in most languages. So it's really, if your congregation hasn't done a lot of global music, it's a great way to get them to do that. I have made a list here. There are so many, and this is just out of like 4 different resources. But of course, whatever your hymnal is, there'll be Alleluias. The Faith We Sing, or Sing the Faith for Presbyterians, same thing. Halle Halle from the Caribbean is a great hallelujah. The UCC hymnal has a wonderful West African hallelujah that I use a lot. It's in 3. Hallelujah, hallelujah. There's a Brazilian hallelujah in the little volume called For Everyone Born, which I highly recommend that you have on your shelf. Your Love is Amazing, hallelujah, Your Love is Amazing from the contemporary Christian genre. You can get that many places, but if you have the More Voices United Church of Canada resource, it's in there. The Upper Room Worship Book has several hallelujahs, wonderful 4-part harmonies. The Glory to God one is a wonderful round. There's a Native American one. Then the Faith We Sing, "Sing hallelujah to the Lord," beautiful one that you can, again, you could use these, either do a different one every Sunday or use one all the way throughout the whole season. Worship and Song has a couple of Alleluias that are wonderful. So these are my favorite Alleluias. When you get the recording, you can stop the recording and write all these down. Okay, so next, changing prayer posture. For the early church, one of the real symbols of the difference between the Lent season and the Easter season was prayer posture. So Lent, you might have lots of kneeling, even prostrating on the floor, but in the Easter season, fasting and kneeling for prayer were no-nos. And so a more uplifted position of prayer could be a wonderful embodied practice for your congregation. So perhaps during a prayer form, whether that's a intercessory prayer or pastoral prayer, you can invite people to stand and use the Oran's position. I don't want to get my hands out too far because you won't see them, but Oran's position wasn't always just the leader's position. Oftentimes sometimes we'll use this at the table, but in the early church, it was the prayer position for all people. And so you could invite people, even if you're in a church where you've never raised your hands before, and that's the Pentecostals down the street, that's the church I grew up in. You could just tell them the historic practice of that and just offer them to open up their hands, to have an uplifted posture during prayer for the season. Could be a really fun thing to do. Rock and musical communion settings. There are even if you just do monthly communion, there are 2 communion Sundays during the season. And so I want to turn you on to some of my favorites. Oh, before that, I love this. Great rehearsal, people. Dancers, make sure you enter stage left during the first chorus. And make those kicks higher, darling. Any questions before we perform on Sunday? And she said, yes. Why can't we have a normal communion service like other churches? I think that's hysterical. So I don't mean like, the Rockettes kind of communion, but Eucharist does mean great Thanksgiving, and so it'd be a wonderful time to incorporate some livelier expressions in your communion settings. In the global praise repertoire, there is one called Lelo Lelo Lilo, and it's a wonderful sort of Caribbean or South American beat. Lelo Lelo Lilo, Lelo Lelo Lilo, Lelo Lelo Lilo, Lelo Lelo Li, Holy Holy Holy. So it goes into the Sanctus, and it's a lot of fun. I will take the Cup of Freedom. That is not published anywhere, but we do have it in the Worship Design Studio. So the Cup of Freedom is one of the Worship Design Studio Easter season series, and I have the music in that. So that's a wonderful one. I will take the cup of freedom and call on the name of God. I will take the cup of freedom and call on the name of God. And then the verses actually are the words of institution. So you have singers do the words of institution, and presiders would simply lift the bread and the cup at that time. The Mark Miller communion setting is one of my favorites. I use it all the time. It's uplifting, it's soaring, it has alleluias in it. That's in the Faith We Sing, or Sing the Faith for you Presbyterians. The communion setting in For Everyone Born by Chris Heckert is also one of my favorites. It's a swing, and I can't think of it right now, and I'm not going to sing it because, believe me, if I sing it, it's the only thing I'll be able to think of. It's one of those earworms, and people will catch on to it like that. Just really wonderful. And then another one of my favorites by Barbara Ham, a dear friend, called Come to the Table of Grace. It's also a swing feel. Come to the table of grace. So just an idea of using some uplifting music to sort of bring your communion alive. If that's not something that you normally do, that especially would be a great way to commemorate that Easter joy through the Easter season. All right, add color incrementally from Easter whites and golds to Pentecost reds. So we're going to see some visual things. The first one you're seeing here is a member of the Worship Design Studio sent this picture in. And in the Worship Design Studio, at one point I had talked to people about making these procession poles out of PVC pipe and foam core in circles, and that's what that's made out of. And then you put ribbons on that of any color, and you see how lovely the flowers are on top of that, cascading over and down. Now what you could do is use that on Easter, make those all white and gold, and then use them subsequent in every Sunday of the series, and just add more yellows and oranges all through the season. And by the time you get to Pentecost, it's all reds and oranges and big fiery. It'd be a lot of fun. But that is so cheap to make. Home Depot, my favorite liturgical shopping place. PVC pipe. Make sure you get it stiff enough that it won't, bend over. Make some very easy stands. You can even do it out of buckets and concrete kind of things. It's just easy and very inexpensive to do. Here's a bigger picture of that. You can see how they had 2. And look at the color that brings into that space. And when you process these things, those ribbons flutter and float, and it's so great. So you could use that throughout the season. Here's another picture of gold. So again, starting on Easter with whites and golds, and then adding more and more color as the season progresses. Again, here's another thing. We could start out with these more muted colors and then add the more bright colors. Here's a wonderful picture of Pentecost. They have the yellows in. And I want to suggest to you that you don't just use red on Pentecost. It's really in having multicolors in there that the red will pop out. Here's some more. These are just paint on paper, these banners hanging from the ceiling. And again, thinking you don't have to use fabric. In the Worship Design Studio, we have some wonderful webinars about visual arts, several in fact. Some of them are about hanging things from the ceiling called dropline systems. I have one with Todd Pick about different settings for every season of the liturgical year and sort of the nitty-gritty how-to. So that's all in there if you'd like to learn more about that. This is the church that is the Worship Design Studio setting that you see on the online, but this was their Easter sunrise morning picture, and I just think that you can just see that the sun is rising. It's just wonderful. I just wanted to show that. No point about it. This is a Todd Pick arrangement using butterflies and flowers, but what I love about this is that the lilies and the tulips, there's actually a mix of flowers rather than all lilies, and I love that there's multicolors in the wrapping on the color on the vases. Yes, I'm seeing in the chat box that people are not seeing pictures. Are some people seeing pictures? You should be. Sorry about that. Okay, some people are. All right, some people are just not seeing it. But suffice it to say, you are supposed to be seeing pictures, and if you're not, then it will definitely be on the recording. So this part of it, especially where I'm showing you these visuals, you'll want to look at that recording toward the end of it and see these. Um, so butterflies is a wonderful image for of resurrection, of transformation, and this is, again, Todd Pick's work. Now, Pentecost. Pentecost practices, sound effects, wind tubes, thunder, wind instruments, chimes, trumpets, anything with wind is really great. This picture is of the wind tubes you can get at kids' stores, and you I'm doing this motion. I don't know what to call it. You just whip them around. That's what you call it. You whip them around, and it creates this whoo kind of things. And they, because they're not all the same, they create different pitches, and they create different pitches the faster you go with them. So it's great for the sound effect, but it's also really cool if you put youth around your congregation and have them do this. It's also the visual that's awesome because it's just this whoo kind of amazing energy that happens. So wind tubes I highly recommend as sound effects. Hanging or dropping items. Rose petals is a really big tradition in Italy for Pentecost, dropping rose petals from the ceiling. So, wedding websites these days are really great places to find stuff like this because people are doing all kinds of creative things at their weddings. I'm looking at this little thing that like shoots rose petals out up into the air. That could be pretty cool. I've never used one before, but I think I'm going to order it. So if you don't have a way to drop them from the ceiling, it looks like you could create a. Now your maintenance people may really not like you after this, but rose petals don't create too much of a mess, hopefully, and nothing the vacuum sweeper can't handle, or things raining down from the ceiling. Anyway, it's just kind of fun. Fabric, balloons, ribbons, all of these things that sort of give us what we're looking for is movement on Pentecost, that idea of something happening, and so movement is really important. Excuse me. Speaking of movement, flying things like dove kites have become very popular. Now, friends, take it from me, you want to practice this, because you can cause harm with dove kites. You want to practice because you want to make sure that you're going enough above the heads of the people and keeping a steady enough pace that those ribbons don't fall down into the midst and then go, get somebody's eye out. So you really have to practice with those things. But they can be really a beautiful way of getting a sense of something happening up in the air. Wearing red, of course, is something that a lot of churches do that can just fill the space with the color, and then your whole space and your fabric and things don't have to carry the whole weight of getting tons of color in the space. But I want to remind you that oftentimes people will come and they either haven't gotten the message to wear red, or they're visitors and they never would have gotten the message. And so have something for people who don't wear red. Just a little piece of fabric they could put on around their neck is a really great thing, but don't leave anybody out. Don't do something that feels like, oh, I'm not in the in crowd. I didn't know. I'm not prepared. So always have something ready. All right. And then, or green. I told you I was going to show you some pictures of the Eastern Orthodox Church. On Pentecost, they dress their sanctuaries in greenery, the Feast of Summer Flowering. And look at these pictures. If you can see, it's just amazing. Go Google Eastern Orthodox Pentecost greening or Feast of Summer Flowering. And it's amazing, some of these things. You can see they've created this whole archway of greenery. And again, it's drawing on, seems to be drawing closely on that Jewish festival of weeks, the harvesting kind of thing, but also the turning of the season and the beginning of summer. And so they talk about how the presiders will carry around greenery in their hands, that people come in and they hold flowers, they bring flowers, and so there's flowers everywhere. So that would be kind of a nice connection to, say, flowering the cross at Easter, which is something that a lot of churches do. Anyway, I just think it's terrific. I have some ideas from people here. I want to note, Old South Church in Boston drops red petals from the ceiling and is breathtaking, giving the size of the place. No kidding. Went to a church where they blew up balloons and then let them go. Let the air out. Real movement. Yes. Nice. Great. This is the great thing about coming onto a webinar live and not just watching the recording of it, and that is that we get to cross-pollinate, is what I call it. All right, we're getting to the end here. This, I think, is stunning. This is another Todd pick, and what I love is that this red things that he has in the vases, the sort of sticks and things, give this sense of fire going up. And so just thinking about how up can you get things, that sense of going up. Again, here's balloons. Yes, bubbles was another thing that some people have done, blowing bubbles, which, how fun is that? Again, you might want to do it outside. Maybe you do that outside afterwards if you're worried about sticky stuff all over. But here's balloons. Just some more pictures of, this is Alexandra Childs, who has she really is the one who talks to us about drop line systems and hanging things from the ceiling. You can see kind of a close-up here, how she's put a pulley system in the ceiling that can hold fabric hanging from the ceiling. There's another close-up of that. And just the wonderful things you can do if you have that. Fire in a bowl. Here's doves in sort of like a mobile, but very long. That's awesome. I love that. Here's the streamer idea, the ribbon idea, but hanging from the ceiling. Um, just some other wonderful. I love this. This is like gift wrap paper, and they created sort of this fire around the Bible. Kind of fun. You can get tons more ideas on our Worship Design Studio Pinterest page. So those of you who are into Pinterest, or if you don't even know what Pinterest is, you can go to actually marciamcfee.com, and on any one of our pages, there's a button that says "Go to our Pinterest page," and our board. Is called With Bravest Fire. That is our Pentecost board, and you can see lots more ideas. You can see over here on the right-hand side how to make a rock bowl flame. Might be kind of fun to create that for Pentecost. Well, friends, we did it. We made it, and we did it in an hour. Terrific. It's great to have you on. I want to remind you that as a thank you for coming on the webinar, I'm giving you a $50 coupon code off of the regularly priced $250 for the year, unlimited members from your church in the Worship Design Studio online. And I've had some members say, can I use that code to re-up my subscription? Absolutely. And even if your subscription hasn't expired yet, the program will automatically give you a year from your current expiration date. So if you want to just go ahead and use that, and it will add a year onto your subscription, that's great. Go to worshipdesignstudio.com, my friends. That's where you can find out more about the studio and get on. Don't forget all of the wonderful ways that you can come and have a retreat, planning retreat with me, either in Tahoe or in these other places in the country. And I am so grateful for all the things that you do. May your Easter season be wildly inspiring for your folks. May you proclaim the joy and the hope that is ours through our discipleship in Jesus Christ, the one who is risen from the dead. Many blessings, my friends. Thank you. Bye-bye.